Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we gotta talk about what went down in East Baton Rouge, because guess what? A local area that is almost always governed by the Democratic Party just decided that they were going to toss out their black female mayor in, again, what is a majority black city that, by the way, is growing ever more black because of a recent dramatic change that has happened to the territory, that has happened to the map. And they said, you know what? We're done with this nonsense. This person totally screwed over our city, so we are going to vote in a white religious Republican in order to replace the black female mayor. And not a Republican running as a Democrat or a non-conservative. Again, a religious Republican running as a conservative just took over this Democrat-run city. Now, we're going to get into this, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
This is a movie. I mean, you couldn't make this up. It's God anointed. This was a God-driven campaign, and it will be a God-driven administration. And it's just absolute, I keep saying a movie, but also it's a movement. We ran a great campaign. We ran a positive campaign. We never veered from that. And I can tell you, from my fellow Catholics in here, these beads, this rosary right here, we rolled in beads every day during all our travels and everywhere we needed to go. A movement. But the people spoke tonight, and it's also a mandate. When you consider the numbers and how many people are ready for change, and all of you in here, with myself, we've said it the entire time, we are the change agent.
So Sid Edwards, who you heard speak right there, is going to be the mayor of Baton Rouge. Now, obviously, you can hear him talking about religion, talking about the role that God has in his life and all that. He broke out the rosary beads. But for those of you who are unaware, this is a guy who is running for election for the first time in his life in Baton Rouge in a very tumultuous time in that particular area. And he just crushed Mayor Broome by 10 points in that election. And again, this is an area that is almost overwhelmingly controlled by Democrats. And part of the reason why people are so angry in Baton Rouge is recently St. George, which is a more white portion of what was formerly Baton Rouge, has incorporated as their own independent municipality due to the fact that the Democrats denied them a school district for years and years and years. Now, we have a lot of videos on St. George and the outrage that many black leaders and Democrats had of them breaking off, and I just want to give you a refresher on that because this kind of sets the tone for everything that we're going to talk about going forward.
The Louisiana Supreme Court today giving the green light for St. George to become its own city with its own services and its own schools. Many in Baton Rouge were opposed to the plan, fighting for years to block it. So just a reminder for you, the effort to create this new city, as you heard, goes back more than a decade, but it wasn't brought to a ballot until 2019 when the voters who live within the St. George area got to decide. With a 60% voter turnout for that election, it passed with a narrow majority, just 54%. The state Supreme Court's decision was a close one as well, with 4 justices in favor and 3 against.
So what ended up happening was you had all these areas that were in one specific section of Baton Rouge where the population was largely white. Now, they are often described as wealthy white individuals, but in reality, these are just more middle-class individuals, and they represent a huge portion of the Baton Rouge tax base. However, repeatedly, they wanted to get their own school district. And one of the reasons why you would want your own school district in Baton Rouge is because Baton Rouge has some of the worst school districts, worse than New Orleans, as we've covered before, in the state of Louisiana, which, by the way, as a state as a whole, does not rank particularly high in terms of their school performance. On top of that, they had a bunch of different issues with crime. They weren't really in belief that the Baton Rouge Police Department, based on the current mayor and the past Democratic mayors, was ever really going to address that. So they decided if they were going to be blocked, which they were repeatedly, from getting their own school district, that they were going to try to form their own city. They were going to secede from Baton Rouge, not the parish, but the city, and form their own place that they could govern. Now, of course, because the majority of this new city, which is about 90,000 people, is going to be white, all the different race hustlers decided to come out in full force to talk about how evil, white, and racist it was that these people wanted to form their own municipality.
And so when you look at the conversation around people wanting a new school district, these are people who ultimately don't want their kids to go to school with black kids. Currently, the school district in Baton Rouge is 80% black, even though the city is 56% black. So white parents in Baton Rouge right now, for the most part, do not send their kids to public schools in Baton Rouge. As a result of not getting that school district, these folks then decided to try to start a city. They failed the first time because the city was, I think at that time, going to be 60% white. They went back, cut out black neighborhoods, cut out black apartment complexes, made the municipality smaller, put it back on the ballot, and got it passed by a vote of 17,000 people.
Now, this was absurd for a number of reasons. First and foremost, the new municipality that was formed when St. George was created is about 19% black. Now, that is not comparable to the overall population of Baton Rouge, but it is significantly more than the black population in the United States of America as a whole. So they're not banning in any way, shape, or form black people from being a part of St. George. They just want to have the Republican area governed in a more Republican way. And again, all they wanted initially was a school board so that they could form their own district, but they were denied this time and time again by the mayor's office, and this goes back years in Baton Rouge. Again, they fought for this for nearly a decade, first to get it on the ballot, which took like 7 years, and then they had to fight it out in court as they decided that they were not going to let them go, despite the fact that there was overwhelming support for this. But in addition to all the vitriol and smears and calling them racist and all that unnecessary stuff, you also had all these different black people who say that black people don't need white people, that white people are evil, white, and racist, and they're disgusting, and they should be shamed from now until the end of time, complaining that white people were leaving, like Roland Martin and all these other different various race hustlers.
So to tell us that the woes or the condition of this city are all the fault of the black leadership, and let's be clear, Roland, the council is majority white, majority conservative in Baton Rouge. It's a 12-member council, 7 white conservatives serve on the Metro Council here in Baton Rouge, and they approve or disapprove of all of the plans of the mayor. And so when we talk about the progress of a community, we have to talk about the inequities and the tale of two cities that have existed for long before Sharon Weston Broome was the mayor of Baton Rouge.
Now, again, these people were obviously talking out of both sides of their mouths, because on the one hand, they're like, white people are disgusting, racist, horrible, they're terrible in every possible way. But then on the other hand, they were like, whoa, wait a minute, don't leave, don't form your own city, majority white people, we need you here. I mean, you're racist and you're terrible, and you should be denied representation, even in something as small as a school district. But you can't just leave and form your own city. You can't vote democratically in order to separate, because they need you in Baton Rouge.
We have to talk about how we've invested in South Baton Rouge, the portion of town that is segregating themselves away, and to the demise of North Baton Rouge, actually. And so if we don't have honest conversations about how we got here, then we can't have an honest conversation about how we move forward. And the truth is, when people talk about this unity and why do we talk about race, this is why we talk about race, because people are literally segregating their children, segregating the city, and then taking away resources from our community.
And while these people were blaming all the problems on Baton Rouge, on these white individuals, on them not supporting the Democrats, who again kept winning over and over and over again in this particular area, now they're mad that these people are leaving and they're going to separate themselves out, rather than creating their utopia that is Baton Rouge that they have been promising, as they have for years and years and years, scapegoated the white population as responsible for the decline of this particular area. Again, it's an absurdity. Now, in addition to this, this group happens to be a large portion of the tax base for Baton Rouge, and they had been paying taxes to the city while they were fighting this out in court, because again, after they voted to leave and incorporate their own place, the city had them bogged down in a dramatic legal fight, and now they ended up in a situation where they paid all this tax money to a city where, guess what, they were no longer residents of. So you ended up in a situation where a bunch of these activists were saying, okay, fine, you could leave, but they still get the tax money from you, because of course, these people want your money, they want to be able to rob you, they believe in taxation without representation, as long as those people who aren't being represented are white people.
The vote of 17,000 now impacts 400,000 people who live in East Baton Rouge Parish, because of the general fund that's $1 billion of city parish money. 300 million of that is not dedicated. And they're going to take away $47, $48 million of resources from the general fund in order to create this new municipality. So I don't really care if they go off and segregate themselves, but I do care that we've paid into the fortunes of that portion of town for the last 50 years. And to say that you're going to start a new community and then we owe you money for that community, well, we've been paying a whole lot for a long time, and we want our portion to be paid for if you're going to get it.
But obviously, this is an absurd proposition because St. George is a new city that is not under the jurisdiction of Baton Rouge, the city, anymore. So they should no longer be obligated to pay taxes to a government that they quite literally voted to secede from. They are now residents and have their own government, their own mayor of St. George. So obviously, this issue and this total debacle, this miscalculation by the mayor is one of the things that cost her dramatically.
We're not saying that everything has been bad in Baton Rouge. We never said that. But there are some things that need to change. And it's my promise to you as the next mayor president, it's going to happen. Coaches generally keep their promises. I don't know about politicians, but coaches do. All right? And I got to be careful because there's more politicians in the room than there are anything else right now.
Now, some of you out there in the audience might be thinking to yourself, wait a minute, Sean, if everything you said is true, if this was the result, if this political disaster happened under Mayor Broome's watch and she was wholly inadequate in providing a mechanism for them to reconcile with the newly founded St. George, and instead she fought them tooth and nail, lost out in court, and then in addition to that, lost all that tax revenue, why are you surprised that a Republican ended up winning this mayoral race? And obviously the answer to that question is because everything I said was true. Again, by a huge portion of the white population of Baton Rouge going to form St. George, a huge portion of the Republican population going to form St. George, they would have actually made Baton Rouge proper more black and more Democratic. And yet, she still lost. She still was defeated. This lifelong career politician who had years and years of experience, years and years of knowing the community, who got herself to the mayor's office, was just completely obliterated by 10 points by a more Democrat, more minority base than they had before.
I would be remiss. I got to thank my family, and I won't name all of them. This is my wife, Beanie. And my children are in here, my grandchildren, my dad, 62 is Shruma grad, and my mama, my sister, my brother-in-laws, extended family, son-in-laws, my daughter's back there. Chase, raise your hand up. We won, buddy.
Now, the reason we're reporting this now is because they had a runoff after the initial election, and this was the head-to-head between the top two contenders, but he absolutely obliterated this woman, and it's just wild to think that this coach with no political experience is now going to govern Baton Rouge better. And ironically, these people who said Baton Rouge would be better off without these white people and all that were actually right because they elected a Republican mayor, and maybe, just maybe, they'll actually start to fix many of the problems in their city. And who knows, if Baton Rouge's issues end up getting fixed, this could potentially lead to the reunification of St. George and Baton Rouge, although I wouldn't hold my breath if I were the residents of St. George. Although I would be very cautious if I were in that camp of going back, because you still have a population that tends to, the majority of the time, vote overwhelmingly Democrat.
So I got to thank my campaign team. And it would be almost impossible to name them all because all of my people were volunteer. They just saw something in this. They saw something in it where we could make it happen. I can tell you, people in the political world will know who my team is. And I got a suggestion for you. If you're ever running for office, I'm going to put the plug in now. There's nowhere to go but besides the team that we assembled. And if I thank y'all so very much, it's appreciated.
Look, I gotta be perfectly honest with all of you guys out there in the audience. I'm very surprised by these results. I'm very shocked that this ended up occurring because if you guys aren't aware, essentially the background of this was that this was pushed as the pro-black campaign and the answer to the evil white racists.
You got from now until 8 o'clock this evening to go cast your ballot. There's no excuse for you not to get up and go vote. Don't be in the number of people who didn't go out and handle their business. We need to re-elect this black woman because she is beginning the progress that we want to see in our community. Matter of fact, that's sidewalks on a Saturday morning. That's sidewalks on a Saturday morning put down in a black neighborhood. So for all those who asking, what has she done? She's making changes in your communities every day. The reality is sometimes those changes, we don't recognize them when they're happening right before us, but we need to be mindful that nobody has been concerned about sidewalks in your neighborhood in all of the years that this community existed until now. So handle your business, text 10 people to get up and go handle their business, to go vote for Mayor Sharon Weston Broome, get her reelected for the last 4 years, because we need to ensure that the progress that we've started continues.
And if you'll recall, when Brendan Johnson got out of the primaries and he was up against an opponent that was much more reasonable than him, he ended up leaning into the racial politics, ended up promoting himself as the champion for black people while condemning his opponent as an evil white racist. And that ultimately ended up working, despite the fact that the residents of Chicago originally voted out Lori Lightfoot because she was this left-wing progressive mayor that they could not stand having in office. So they ended up taking a step forward by getting rid of Lightfoot, and then 12 steps back by falling for this racial nonsense. And the demographics of Baton Rouge, even before the split from St. George, were always more favorable to this kind of racial pandering than the city of Chicago. And yet, despite the fact that, again, they got blacker and more democratic, that did not work. Broome's maneuver to label herself as fighting against the evil white racist who checks notes decided that they were going to vote to form their own government because they didn't have a school board, that ended up costing her the election, and it was in a decisive way.
So Sid Edwards was elected with 19% of the total registered voters in East Baton Rouge Parish. I want to get on here and make it clear that he does not have a mandate, that 81% of the population either did not vote or voted for somebody else. But he's the mayor because only 34% of the population showed up to vote in East Baton Rouge Parish yesterday. 296,000 registered voters. Sid got 57,000 votes. That's 19% of total registered voters in East Baton Rouge Parish elected the next mayor. So I don't want nobody coming around here acting like we got a Republican mandate. We do not. What we do have is a problem with the leadership in the Democrats and being able to turn out black voters. And I've been telling y'all this, so maybe now somebody's going to listen to you.
Again, the election results were something like 54% to 44%. This is a commanding victory for a Republican. It is definitely a mandate, and honestly, this is one of those instances where you're very hopeful that this turns out like Giuliani to Bloomberg in New York City in some ways, where a lot of the problems end up getting fixed, and even though you have this population that will likely never vote for a Republican at the presidential level, at least on the local level, they understand the value of good Republican governance. They appreciate the value of their representatives not being these radical defund the police types, not trying to divide everybody up by race, and not trying to deny representation to certain portions of their city based on the fact that they think it doesn't align with their racial politics. Now, I will say this again because it bears repeating. While all these other different black leaders were attacking St. George, calling them racist, calling them evil white, and all these kinds of disgusting names throughout the whole St. George process, the NAACP chapter that is local to the area, the guy that they had speak out about this said, listen, I don't want them to separate. I think this is going to cause problems for Baton Rouge, but you know what? They voted to do so, and we are a democracy, so you're allowed to vote in a way that I disagree with. So there's one activist for sure that I think deserves a ton of credit, and that is the head of the local NAACP in that particular area, because he didn't really play into the racial politics that were being pushed by the Roland Martins, by all these different other various activists who just want to smear these people as evil, wealthy, white racists who are so disgusting and so horrible and shouldn't be in charge of any black people at all, that we're angry that they decided to separate out from the majority black city and go do their own thing, which presumably would be better for black people, but of course, it definitely wasn't. Now, of course, I'm going to leave this up to you guys out there in the audience. What do you think of the whole St. George versus Baton Rouge thing? What do you think of the mayoral election? And do you think this guy can pull it off, turn this city around to any significant degree based on the fact that he does have a commanding political mandate, and we've seen what Republican mayors can do in Democrat-run cities like New York City, which was transformed transformed from a very dangerous city in the United States of America to the safest big city in the country. Again, all your thoughts down in the comments below. If you like the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about Baton Rouge going right. Till next time.